My name is Vanessa Cole, and I'm 32 years old. For 12 years, my family's companies sent out an anniversary photo, the same three people, front and center, in every brochure, every client mailer, every page of the website. I was never in a single one. When I finally asked my father why, he looked at me and said, "You don't fit the brand, Vanessa." Then this past October, my mother called with an invitation I never expected. They wanted me in this year's photo. After a decade of being edited out, I was suddenly essential. I arrived at the studio 30 minutes early. What I overheard through that half-open door made me turn around and walk out without saying a word. And what I mailed to my grandfather 3 days later made my sister call me screaming at 2 in the morning. Before I tell you what happened, take a second and hit like and subscribe if this story is already pulling you in, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight. To understand why I did what I did, I need to take you back 12 years, to the first photo I was quietly cut out of. I was 20 that first year, home from college for the company's 15th anniversary. My family runs Coleman Design Group, a mid-sized architectural and interior design firm my grandfather Walter built from a two-person office in the 70s into something with real regional weight. My mother handles marketing, my father runs operations. My younger sister Paige, 3 years behind me, was being groomed, though nobody used that word out loud, to eventually take over client relations. Mom announced over breakfast that the anniversary brochure needed a hero photo for the cover. Everyone in their nicest business casual, she said, not quite looking at me. The photographer's coming Saturday. I wore a navy blazer I'd bought specifically for it, practiced a professional smile in the mirror the night before. When we arrived at the studio, the photographer glanced at his clipboard, then at the four of us, and said, "I've only got 3 names on the shot list here." My mother's smile went instantly polished, the one she reserves for people outside the family. "Vanessa's just here to watch today, aren't you, honey?" I stood there, blazer and all. I thought we were all being photographed. My father took my elbow and steered me toward the hallway, his grip firm and deliberate rather than gentle. "You don't photograph well with the brand, Vanessa," he said quietly. "Nothing personal, it's about consistency. The clients need to see the same 3 faces, year after year. That's what builds trust in a firm like ours." "I don't understand what that even means." "You don't need to understand the marketing strategy," he said, already walking back toward the studio. "Just wait out here." I sat in that lobby for 40 minutes. Through the glass partition, I watched the photographer position my parents and Paige under the lights, watched them laugh at something he said, watched Paige toss her hair and hold a pose like she'd rehearsed it. On my way to the restroom, I caught my own reflection in a mirror in the hallway. The lighting was fine. My navy blazer looked sharp. There was no consistency problem. There never had been one. Just a decision that had already been made before I ever walked in that door. I need to pause the story here for a second, because I think this next part is where a lot of people watching will recognize something in their own life. I need to ask you this honestly. If you've ever been told you didn't fit something, a family photo, a team, a group, but couldn't get anyone to explain exactly why, drop a comment below. I promise you're not the only one, and I promise it says far more about them than it ever said about you. Now, back to where it started. Growing up, the pattern was subtle enough that I spent years doubting my own read on it. Paige needed more encouragement. Paige got nervous in front of groups. Paige required a gentler touch. I heard those explanations so often as a kid that I genuinely believed them for a while, believed that my sister was simply more fragile than I was, and that my job, as the sturdier one, was to take up less room so she'd have enough to feel secure. I got good grades quietly. I won a regional science fair project on load-bearing structures when I was 12, and didn't even bother mentioning it at dinner because I already knew, somewhere in my body, that it would get a distracted, "That's nice, honey," before the conversation drifted back to whatever Paige needed that week. There's a specific kind of loneliness in being the reliable one in a family built around someone else's need for constant reassurance. Nobody ever told me directly that my role was to need nothing, but I understood it the way children absorb unspoken rules, through repetition, through which emotions got attention in that house and which ones got quietly waited out. I used to sketch bridge cross-sections in the margins of my school notebooks just to have something that was entirely, unambiguously mine, something nobody could reframe as attention-seeking or take credit for. Now, back to where it started. 3 years later, I graduated with honors in structural engineering, a genuinely brutal major, the kind that took 2 summer jobs to afford, and more all-nighters than I can count, while Paige was posting spring break photos from a trip my parents funded as a reward for finishing her freshman year of business school. The graduation ceremony was held on a bright May afternoon. I walked across that stage with my diploma held high, years of exhaustion and pride compressed into a single moment. I found my family afterward in the crowd. My father already had his phone out. My mother was smoothing down Paige's sundress. "Let's get some pictures," she chirped. "Paige, go stand by the fountain, the light's perfect there." Paige, who was 20, who had just finished her sophomore year of business school, who wasn't graduating anything that day. I watched them take what must have been 30 pictures of my sister by the fountain. "Mom," I said finally, holding up my diploma, "could someone maybe—" "We'll get yours in a minute, honey, the light's just so good right now for Paige." They never got mine. A stranger nearby was kind enough to take one photo of me on my own phone. That evening, I came home to find a new framed photo already hung in the front hallway of my parents' house. Paige at the fountain, grinning, sunlight catching her hair. My diploma sat on the kitchen counter where I had left it, unacknowledged. That December, I happened to see the proof sheet for that year's Coleman Design Group holiday client mailer sitting on my mother's desk. 3 people, arranged carefully in front of the firm's newly renovated lobby. My father, my mother, Paige. No gap, no empty space where I should have been. They'd composed the shot as a complete unit, 3 people who made a whole picture on their own. Someone in that family, though, was sending me something every single year that I wouldn't discover until over a decade later. By 28, I'd built a career that didn't need my family's approval to feel real. Senior structural engineer at a firm across town, a small loft apartment I'd furnished piece by piece myself, and enough savings that the number actually surprised me when I checked it. I met Daniel at an industry conference. He did commercial photography for architecture firms, ironically enough, and had the quiet, steady presence that made rooms feel less loud. 3 months into dating, he asked to see photos of my family. I went quiet. "Everyone has family photos," he said gently, not pushing. "In my family," I said slowly, "I'm the one who doesn't end up in them." He didn't ask me to explain further. He just reached across the table and held my hand. That night, lying awake, I finally admitted something to myself I'd been avoiding for years. By staying quiet about it for so long, I'd made my own invisibility permanent. Every brochure that went out without me in it, every hallway photo where I didn't exist, I'd let them slowly write me out of the family story. If I stayed silent forever, I'd simply become the daughter who was never really there. A few weeks later, walking through the park, Daniel mentioned something almost offhand. "I shoot corporate photos for a lot of family-run firms," he said, kicking at a pile of leaves. "You know what I've noticed? The ones most obsessed with looking unified in every shot are almost always hiding something underneath it." I thought about the immaculate brochures, the coordinated blazers, the carefully arranged smiles that never once included me. What exactly were my parents so desperate to project, and more importantly, who specifically were they projecting it for? My grandfather Walter had always been a bit of a mystery to me growing up, kept at a careful distance. He lived alone in the same house he'd raised my mother and her siblings in, an hour outside the city, still technically chairman of the company he'd founded, even though my father ran day-to-day operations. Growing up, I rarely saw him without supervision. "Grandpa's resting. Grandpa's got a lot on his plate right now. Don't bother Grandpa with that." But every year on my birthday, an email arrived. Long, warm, full of questions about my engineering work, about whether I was eating properly, about a bridge project he'd read about that reminded him of something I'd once said as a kid. I'd reply, and we'd go back and forth for a week before it tapered off. Then, when I was around 22, his emails just stopped arriving. My replies apparently went unanswered. My mother told me he'd gotten overwhelmed with technology and needed space from screens. I stopped reaching out. It felt like one more door quietly closing. My Aunt Corinne, my mother's younger sister, quieter, kinder, always somewhat overshadowed in that family, changed everything. We ran into each other at a farmer's market when I was 29. "Your grandfather asks about you constantly," she said, examining a peach like it held some kind of answer. I nearly dropped my coffee. "He does. Diane tells him you're too busy with work, that you don't really want to talk to him anymore." Her jaw tightened. "That's not true, is it?" "I thought he didn't want to hear from me." Corinne set the peach down. "Your mother manages his email account now, Vanessa. Has for years, ever since his eyesight started giving him trouble. She reads things to him and she types his replies." My stomach turned cold. "He thinks you stopped writing to him. He's been heartbroken about it. He used to tell me you reminded him of himself at your age, the one in the family who never quite got let all the way into the room." Something had clearly been taken from me. I just didn't yet understand how much. October of this year, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. My mother. I almost didn't pick up. "Vanessa." Her voice was strange, softer than I was used to. "We're doing the 12-year anniversary photo shoot next Sunday for the new brochure and the website refresh." A pause. "We want you in it this year." The words didn't compute at first. 12 years of exclusion, and now this, out of nowhere? I kept my voice neutral, the same flat, factual register I use for load calculations. "After all this time?" "Grandpa Walter," she said, and I heard something careful in how she chose the next words. "He's been asking about the whole family being represented properly. He wants to see everyone together for the anniversary materials." "Does Grandpa want this, or do you want this?" Silence stretched. "Both," she said finally. "So, you'll come?" "I need to think about it." "Don't think too long. Sunday, 2 o'clock, the downtown studio." A beat. "Oh, and wear the charcoal gray. It's the brand color refresh this year." She hung up before I could respond. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. 12 years of "you don't fit the brand." 12 years of being cropped, quite literally, out of every representation of that company. And now, suddenly, I was necessary, because Grandpa Walter wanted it. I thought about all the ways I'd rationalized the exclusion over the years, the small stories I'd told myself to make it hurt less. Maybe it really was about lighting. Maybe the brand really did need consistency and I was reading too much into a business decision. Maybe I'd simply misunderstood something innocent as a child and carried the wrong version of events forward into adulthood without ever checking it against reality. Sitting there with that phone still warm in my hand, I realized how much energy I'd spent, quietly, for over a decade, trying to make my own family's behavior make sense in a way that didn't require me to accept how deliberate it actually was. That phone call was the first time the story they'd been telling me and the story I actually needed to hear finally, unmistakably, stopped matching up. I called Daniel and explained everything. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think something's wrong," carefully he said. "People don't reverse a 12-year pattern like that without a reason." A pause. "You could say no, or," he said slowly, "you could say yes and actually find out what they're really after." I thought about Corinne's words, about a grandfather who thought I'd simply stopped writing to him, about years of emails that apparently never reached him and replies that apparently never reached me. "I'll go," I decided, "but on my own terms. I'm getting there early and I'm listening before they know I'm in the building." I called Aunt Corinne the next morning. No preamble. "I need to know what's actually going on." She sighed, like she'd been waiting for the call. "Your grandfather's health took a turn about 2 months ago. Nothing sudden, his heart mostly, and his memory's been slipping in and out. His estate attorney and the company's outside counsel have been meeting with him about the succession trust, the one that decides who actually controls Coleman Design Group after he's gone." "What does that have to do with a photo shoot?" I asked. "He's been asking pointed questions lately. Why you're never in any company photos, why he never hears from you anymore, why the family looks so unified in every brochure, but he can't remember the last time he actually saw you all in one room together." She paused. "Your mother told him you'd be in this year's anniversary photo. Promised him, actually. It's part of why he hasn't finalized the succession language yet." The pieces clicked into place with a coldness I hadn't expected. They didn't want me in that photo because they'd missed me. They didn't want me because they'd finally recognized my value. They needed me as evidence, proof of a united family that would satisfy a dying man's conditions for signing over full control of the company he'd spent 50 years building. "They're not getting away with this," I told Corinne, my voice steadier than I felt. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell Grandpa the truth. All of it." That night, Daniel and I sat at my kitchen table while I pulled a folder out of a drawer I hadn't opened in years. "You're really doing this," he said, not judging, just confirming. "I'm going to hear them say it themselves first, and then I'm going to show Grandpa exactly what they've been hiding from both of us." Inside the folder were 12 years of printed company materials, every brochure, every client mailer, every About Us page I'd managed to save or request from clients and old coworkers over the years. Year after year, the same 3 faces, never mine, not once. "Why did you keep all this?" Daniel asked, flipping through an old brochure from 2019. "Honestly, I don't know," I admitted. "Some part of me thought maybe someday someone would need to see it, someone who actually mattered." I started sorting them by year. "I'm going to build an album, the brochure from each year next to a photo of me from that same year, side by side, proof of exactly what they did." Daniel nodded slowly. "And you'll send it to your grandfather after Sunday." "After I hear what they really think of me first." Sunday came faster than expected. I put on the charcoal gray blazer, the one my mother had specified, checked myself in the mirror. I looked fine. I always had. 2 days before the shoot, Aunt Corinne asked to meet me for coffee carrying a thick manila envelope. "I've been holding on to these for longer than I should have," she said, sliding it across the table. "I should have given them to you years ago." Inside were dozens of printed emails, all addressed to me, all from my grandfather's account, spanning more than a decade. My hands trembled as I opened the first one, dated the winter I was 22. "Vanessa, I haven't heard back from you in a few weeks. I hope the new job is treating you well. Your mother tells me you've been swamped with a bridge retrofit project. Sounds exactly like the kind of thing that would have lit you up as a kid. Right when you have a moment, I miss our conversations. I read another and another. 12 years of birthday notes, project questions, small updates about the company, threaded through with a growing confusion and hurt from a grandfather who genuinely could not understand why his granddaughter had stopped writing back. One from 4 years ago. Vanessa, if I've done something to upset you, please just tell me plainly. I've written so many times and heard nothing. Have I lost you the way I feel like I've lost so much lately? Tears blurred my vision. He thought I'd abandoned him. Your mother's managed his inbox for years, Corinne said, her voice tight with old anger. Incoming and outgoing. Every message filtered through her first. Why? Control over the narrative he sees, making sure he only sees the version of this family she wants him to see, right up until he signs that trust. I sat with that folder of printed emails for nearly an hour after Corinne left, reading through them a second and then a third time. What struck me most wasn't the volume of it, though 12 years of correspondence is a genuinely heavy thing to hold in your hands all at once. It was the tone. My grandfather hadn't written to me like an obligation or like someone checking a box on a family duty list. He'd written like someone who was actually curious about my life, asking follow-up questions about projects I'd mentioned months earlier, remembering small details, referencing a joke from a birthday call 2 years before it. Somebody had been paying that kind of attention to me the entire time I believed nobody in that family was paying attention at all. I clutched the pages to my chest. This wasn't just paper, it was evidence of a relationship deliberately dismantled, piece by piece, for over a decade. Saturday night, the eve of the shoot, Daniel and I worked past midnight assembling the album. Each spread told 1 year of the story. On the left, that year's official company photo, 3 smiling faces with no room for a fourth. On the right, a photo of me from that same year, unaware I'd already been erased from the record. At the front, I placed my grandfather's own printed emails, the ones I'd never actually received replies to, alongside a short letter I wrote myself. Grandpa, for 12 years I thought you'd simply lost interest in hearing from me. I was wrong. What you're about to see is the truth that was kept from both of us, not to hurt anyone, but because you deserve to know what actually happened. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped wanting to hear from you. Your granddaughter, Vanessa. This isn't revenge, Daniel said, quietly, closing the album. No, I agreed, tracing the cover. This is just finally being seen. I sat with that thought for a while after he'd gone to bed, the album still open on the table in front of me. There's a strange, quiet grief that comes with assembling 12 years of your own erasure into something organized and legible. It's one thing to feel excluded in the moment, to carry a vague, unnamed hurt around for years without ever fully looking at the shape of it. It's another thing entirely to lay it out chronologically, brochure by brochure, and watch the pattern become undeniable in a way that no explanation about brand consistency could ever talk its way around again. I remember thinking, closing the album that night, that whatever happened the next day, I had already given myself something no one could take back. Proof in my own handwriting and my own collected evidence that I had never imagined any of it. Sunday, 30 minutes early, Daniel dropped me a block from the studio. The building was a converted warehouse space downtown, exposed brick, industrial lighting. Coleman Design Group had done the renovation themselves years ago, one of their signature projects. The main entrance was locked for the private booking, but I remembered from childhood there was a side door near the loading dock that stayed open for equipment deliveries. I slipped through it quietly. The client lounge was empty, soft instrumental music playing from a speaker somewhere. Through a glass partition, I could see the main studio being set up, charcoal backdrop, brand-approved props, careful lighting rigs. Voices drifted from an adjoining meeting room, its door standing slightly ajar. My mother's voice. Paige's. "She's actually coming?" Paige said, sounding almost incredulous. "She confirmed yesterday," my mother said, clipped and businesslike. "Incoming and outgoing." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I can't believe we have to do this," Paige continued, a dramatic sigh in her voice. 12 years of clean brand photography, and now we've got to squeeze her back in. "It's one photo shoot, Paige." My mother's voice dropped lower. I strained to hear it. "One afternoon of looking like a unified family, then things go back to normal." But why does Grandpa even care right now? He's barely tracking half the conversations he has these days. "He's tracking enough to keep asking his attorney questions," my father's voice cut in from somewhere deeper in the room. "The succession trust is worth close to $11 million in company equity, Paige. $11 million. We play nice for one afternoon, he signs off, we're set for good." I stopped breathing. "So Vanessa's just, what, a prop?" Paige asked. My mother laughed softly. "She's always been a prop, sweetie. She's just never known it." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. I should have walked away right then. Instead, I needed to hear it all. "Walk me through the plan again," my father said, calm and calculating, the voice he used for closing difficult client deals. "Walter's been questioning why Vanessa's never in the anniversary photos," my mother said, sounding rehearsed. "I told him she's been too consumed with her engineering work, that she's private, that cameras make her uncomfortable. He bought that for years. Lately he's been pushing harder, told his attorney he won't finalize the trust language until he sees, in his words, real proof the family is unified." "Unified?" Paige repeated, and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. "Hence the photo," my father said. "Nice family shot, all 4 of us. Send it straight to Walter, along with a printed copy for his nightstand. He sees his granddaughter looking happy with us, signs the trust, everyone benefits." "And then," Paige asked, "then Vanessa goes back to wherever she goes. We don't need to see her again until the next time it's useful." Something cold settled into my chest. Not surprise, exactly. I'd suspected as much for weeks, but hearing it said out loud, so casually, so matter-of-fact, landed differently than I expected. "I already had the layout mocked up," my mother continued, and I heard the click of heels crossing the floor. "There's a marked space where Vanessa stands. One quick edit later if we ever need to remove her again. Done. Back to 3. I peered through the gap in the door. My mother held up a proof layout, 3 confident silhouettes with a faint 4th outline sketched in, like a puzzle piece they only intended to borrow when it was convenient. "She doesn't suspect anything?" my father asked. "Vanessa? She's been quietly hoping to be included for years," my mother said dismissively. "She's probably thrilled we finally asked." Paige gave a small laugh. "Desperate." "What about the wording on the trust language itself?" my father asked. "Walter's attorney mentioned something about a demonstrated family cohesion clause. Do we know exactly what that means in practice?" "It means he wants to see us functioning as a unit before he signs off on full transfer. 1 photo, 1 afternoon, and we satisfy the clause. His attorney doesn't need to interview anyone. He just needs to see the picture and hear that everyone's on good terms." And if Vanessa says something to him directly afterwards, Corinne's gotten close to her lately, hasn't she? "Corinne doesn't know anything specific," my mother said, though something in her voice wavered slightly, just enough that I noticed it even through the door. "And Walter barely retains half of what people tell him these days anyway. By the time anyone could plant a seed of doubt, the trust will already be signed." I stepped back from the door. They thought I was desperate. They thought I was pathetic and grateful. They were about to learn exactly how wrong that assumption was. I pushed the door open. 3 heads snapped toward me. For a moment, nobody moved. My mother's hand froze mid-gesture, still holding the mock-up layout. My father's face went completely blank. Paige's mouth fell open. Vanessa, my mother recovered first, her smile sliding back into place like a mask. Honey, whatever you think you heard. Prop, I held up one finger. 11 million, another finger. Then she goes back to wherever she goes. A third finger. Desperate. Paige went pale. My father stepped forward. Now, Vanessa, let's not overreact. I'm not overreacting, I said, looking directly at him. I'm finally reacting appropriately. You're misunderstanding the whole situation, my mother said, an edge creeping into her voice now. Really? I gestured at the mock-up in her hand. Is that why there's a marked space for me you can insert and delete whenever it's convenient? Nobody answered. 12 years, I said, keeping my voice level. 12 years of being cropped out, and the only reason you want me now is to convince a man who trusted you that this family isn't what it clearly is. That's not... Paige started. I'm done. I turned toward the exit. Don't contact me again. Vanessa, my mother's voice went sharp, if you walk out that door, don't you dare come back. I paused at the threshold. I was never really allowed all the way in the first place. I walked out into the crisp October afternoon. Daniel was waiting at the curb. One look at my face, and he opened the passenger door without a word. Drive, I said. We have a package to send. If you were in my position right there, would you have gone through with the photo shoot for the sake of keeping the peace, or would you have walked out exactly like I did? Drop a comment below. Stay or walk. I genuinely want to know what you'd have done. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, this is the moment to do it, because what I sent my grandfather 3 days later changed absolutely everything. We drove straight to Aunt Corinne's house. She was waiting on the porch, as if she'd somehow already known I was coming. I take it the shoot didn't go as planned, she said as I climbed out of the car. It happened, just not the way they planned it. I retrieved the album from the back seat, its weight suddenly feeling significant in a way it hadn't the night before. I need to get this to Grandpa, directly. If I send it myself, Mom intercepts it before it ever reaches him. Corinne nodded slowly. I visit him every Tuesday and Thursday. I can hand it to him myself. Her eyes were bright. I've watched my sister manage that man's entire inbox for over a decade, Vanessa. I should have said something sooner. She took the album carefully into her arms. Let me make this right. 3 days passed, the longest 3 days of my life. Tuesday evening, my phone rang. Aunt Corinne. He saw it, she said, her voice thick. He saw all of it. My stomach dropped. How did he take it? He cried for over an hour, Vanessa. Not sad tears, furious ones. She sniffled audibly. He kept saying, they kept my granddaughter from me. My own daughter did this. He couldn't believe it. There's no denying 12 years of printed brochures and his own emails staring back at him and his own handwriting. Relief flooded through me so intensely, my knees nearly buckled. Does he believe me? Honey, he has his own words in front of him. There's nothing left to deny. A pause. He called his attorney the next morning, Vanessa. He's making changes to the succession trust. I didn't do this for the company or the money. I know that. That's exactly why he's doing it. Corinne's voice softened. He said, Vanessa wasn't trying to get anything from me. She was just trying to be seen, and I failed to notice for 12 years. She paused again. He wants to see you before he tells the rest of the family what he's decided. Can you come Thursday? I looked at Daniel, who was watching me from across the room. He nodded. I'll be there, I told her. Good, Corinne said. He's been waiting 12 years for you, Vanessa. Don't make him wait any longer than that. My grandfather's house was quieter than I remembered, softer somehow, the way places feel when someone inside them is running out of time. A home health aide let me in. Grandpa Walter sat in his favorite armchair by the window, the album open across his lap, clearly having gone through it more than once already. He looked up when I entered. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. His eyes, still remarkably sharp despite everything, moved slowly over my face, like he was trying to memorize it all over again. Vanessa, His voice was thinner than I remembered, but warm. "There's my girl." I crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt beside his chair. He reached out with a trembling hand and cupped my face. "You didn't abandon me," he said, tears tracing the lines of his cheeks. "You were kept from me." "I didn't know, Grandpa." My own tears fell freely now. "I thought you'd just lost interest. I thought you—" "I know, sweetheart. I know now." He pulled me into an embrace that smelled like cedar and old paper, exactly as I remembered from childhood visits decades ago. We stayed like that for a long time. Finally, he released me and gestured toward the album. "I signed new trust language this morning. My attorney came at 8. "Grandpa, you don't have to." He held up a thin hand. "I'm not doing this because I'm angry about money, Vanessa. I'm doing this because of truth." He pressed a small sealed envelope into my palm. "I've written letters to everyone, your mother, your father, Paige, Corinne, explaining exactly why I've changed things and exactly what I now understand." A tired but resolute smile crossed his face. "They'll finally understand you can't build a company or a family on a lie, and that I always knew which granddaughter actually loved me for who I was, not what I was worth." "I never wanted to hurt them, Grandpa. I just wanted you to know the truth." "I understand that, sweetheart. I've spent 50 years building a company on the idea that a good structure only holds up if every load-bearing piece is honest about what it's actually carrying." He tapped the album gently. "Turns out I let a fault line run straight through my own family and didn't notice until you showed me exactly where it was. That's not a failure on your part. That's a failure on mine for not asking harder questions a long time ago." I want to pause the story again for a second here, because I'm curious what you think. Do you believe I did the right thing sending that album through my aunt instead of confronting my parents about it face to face first? Comment below, right or wrong, and tell me why. I genuinely want to hear it. And if you're still with me, turn on notifications, because what my sister said to me at 2 in the morning is where everything finally came apart. The call came at 2 a.m. I'd finally been sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks when my phone lit up the dark room. Paige's name on the screen. I answered on the 3rd ring. "What did you do?" Her scream was loud enough that Daniel stirred instantly awake beside me. "Hello to you too, Paige. You showed Grandpa the letters. Grandpa sent letters to everyone. Dad's pacing the living room like a lunatic. Mom's actually crying. Serena, what did you—" She caught herself. "Vanessa, what did you do?" I sat up slowly, kept my voice calm. "I told Grandpa the truth." "The truth?" Her laugh was sharp, almost hysterical. "You destroyed us. You showed him the brochures and the emails and all of it. You're supposed to be family." "Am I?" I asked quietly. "Because families don't crop each other out of the picture for 12 years. Families don't manage a dying man's inbox to control what he believes about his own granddaughter. Families don't call each other props." Silence on the other end. "Grandpa restructured the trust," Paige said, her voice cracking. "Dad's operational stake got cut in half, so did Mom's marketing equity. He gave the largest new share to you and Corinne." "I didn't ask for that." "But you're getting it, aren't you? You got exactly what you wanted." "What I wanted was for Grandpa to know I never abandoned him. What I wanted was for him to actually see me before it's too late. The company equity was never the point." "Easy to say when you're the one getting it," Paige snapped. I was tired now, tired of explaining, tired of justifying something I hadn't even engineered. I'm not going to apologize for telling the truth. If the truth destroyed something, it wasn't built on anything solid to begin with. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, looking over at Daniel, who watched me steadily. "I really won't." I hung up. My father called the next morning. His voice was different, not angry, but cold, calculated, the negotiation voice he used when a client deal wasn't going his way. "You've made a serious mistake, Vanessa." "Good morning, Dad." "This isn't a joke. Do you understand what you've done to this family?" I showed Grandpa the truth. If the truth damaged the family was already broken. 12 years of stability,
12 years of maintaining relationships and structure, and you threw it away because you're bitter about some photographs. Something in me finally snapped loose. Stability? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You call cropping your own daughter out of every company photo for 12 years stability? Controlling your father's inbox so he'd believe I abandoned me? That's not stability, Dad. That's cruelty with a marketing budget. You don't understand the pressures we were under. I understand perfectly. You needed a clean brand image, and I didn't fit the frame.
Silence stretched between us. Then his voice shifted, softer, almost conciliatory. Walter's left you a significant equity stake. If you were to talk to him, convince him to reconsider some of the changes, we could work something out, split the difference. I let that hang in the air for a moment. You're trying to negotiate with me right now. I'm trying to be reasonable. No, I said. You're trying to buy my cooperation, exactly like you tried to use me as a prop to get his signature in the first place. Vanessa, I'm done, Dad. If you hang up right now, that's it. We're finished. I thought about 12 years of empty spaces in family photos, of emails that never reached me, of a grandfather who spent over a decade quietly heartbroken, thinking I'd simply stopped caring. We were finished a long time ago, I said quietly. You just never noticed. I ended the call. A week later, Aunt Corinne called with an update. It's chaos over there, she said, though she didn't sound entirely unhappy about it. Diane hasn't stopped crying. Robert's been calling Walter's attorney trying to contest the trust changes. Can he? No. Walter was independently evaluated last month by 2 separate physicians, fully lucid, fully competent. His decisions stand. She paused. The company's board also got copies of the letters, Vanessa. Word travels fast in an industry this small. A couple of long-standing clients have already asked pointed questions about what happened. I felt something complicated settle in my chest. Not satisfaction, exactly, something heavier. I didn't want to humiliate them, I said. I just wanted Grandpa to know the truth. I know, sweetheart, Corinne said gently, but sometimes truth has consequences attached to it. They built their entire image on a lie. When the lie collapsed, so did the image. How's Paige handling all of it? She tried calling Walter to apologize last week, Corinne said. He wouldn't take the call, told his assistant the only granddaughter he wanted to talk to right now was you. A pause. I think, underneath all the anger, Paige is starting to understand she got cast in a role in this family too, just a different one than yours. The golden one still has a script to follow. It's just a different kind of pressure. I thought about that for a long moment after we hung up. I didn't feel sorry for Paige exactly, not yet. Maybe not ever fully, but I understood in a way I hadn't before that being the favored child in a family built on image isn't actually the same thing as being seen either. It's just a different, shinier kind of performance. Grandpa Walter, despite everything, insisted on rescheduling the anniversary gala rather than canceling it outright. 50 years of work doesn't stop mattering just because the people running it made some ugly choices, he told me over the phone. I'd like you there, as my guest, not as anyone's prop this time. I almost said no. Daniel talked me through it over 2 long conversations, and in the end I decided the same thing I'd decided about the photo shoot months earlier. I would go, but entirely on my own terms, standing next to the people who actually saw me, not performing inclusion for anyone else's benefit. The gala was held in the same renovated warehouse space where the original photo shoot had happened, strange as that felt walking back in. Grandpa Walter sat at the head table, noticeably frailer than he'd been even a few months before, but sharp-eyed and steady.
He'd insisted my name go on the program as a guest of honor, in the same size type as the company's founding partners. My father saw it before I arrived and, according to Corinne, spent 20 minutes trying to get the printer to reissue the programs. Walter refused. I arrived with Daniel in a deep green dress that had nothing to do with any brand color palette, and found my seat near the front, 2 chairs down from where my parents sat rigid and unspeaking. Paige was there too, alone at a nearby table, watching me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Midway through the evening, after the formal remarks about the company's 50-year history, Walter surprised everyone by asking to add a few words of his own that weren't on the printed program. He stood slowly, leaning on his cane, and the room quieted. 50 years ago, I built this company on a simple idea: that good work speaks for itself, and that the people who show up honestly year after year are the ones who deserve to be recognized for it. I let that idea slip somewhere along the way inside my own family, without noticing. He paused, looking directly at me. My granddaughter Vanessa reminded me of that this year, in a way I won't forget for whatever time I have left. I want this room to know that clearly tonight, in front of everyone who's been part of this company's story. The applause that followed was warm, sustained, genuine in a way that felt entirely different from the practiced applause of a brand event. My father's jaw was tight throughout all of it. My mother's eyes were wet, although I couldn't tell if it was from shame, grief, or something else entirely. I didn't need to know which one. I simply let the moment be what it was, without needing anything further from either of them. Afterward, in the reception area outside the main hall, Paige approached me, carefully, the way you might approach something you weren't sure would still be there if you moved too fast. "Vanessa," she said, "can we talk?" I studied my sister for a moment, looking for the dismissiveness I'd heard through that studio door months earlier. What I saw instead looked more like exhaustion and something close to fear. "What do you want to say, Paige?" I asked. "I'm sorry," the words came out in a rush, "for the photos, for what I said that day, for all of it. I told myself for years it wasn't really my decision, that it was Mom and Dad's call and I just went along with it. But I knew, I always kind of knew, and I never said anything. You didn't think I was a real person in the equation. I was just something inconvenient to manage." Her silence confirmed it. "Paige," I said, keeping my voice gentle but steady, "I forgive you. I genuinely do." Relief flooded across her face. "But forgiving you doesn't mean I want to rebuild a close relationship right now. It means I'm choosing peace for myself, instead of carrying this anger around for another decade." I touched her arm briefly. "I hope you find whatever you're actually looking for in this family, but I don't think you're going to find it through me anymore." She nodded, tears slipping down her face, and didn't push further. I watched her walk back toward our parents' table and felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, just a quiet, settled kind of closure. Christmas arrived a few months later. Daniel and I spent Christmas Eve with Aunt Corinne, cooking dinner together and watching old films. Simple, quiet, genuinely peaceful, maybe for the first time in years. On Christmas morning, an envelope arrived in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was this year's Coleman Design Group holiday client mailer. I studied it for a long moment. There they were, my mother, my father, Paige, arranged from front of the renovated lobby, but something had shifted. My father's jaw looked tight. My mother's eyes seemed puffy even through the professional retouching. Paige stood slightly apart from the other three, arms crossed. There was no warm caption this year, just a plain, impersonal, season greetings in a generic font. And there was no marked borrowed space where I should have stood. They'd positioned themselves tightly together, 3 people trying hard to look like a complete unit. but the composition read as unbalanced, like something essential was missing that no amount of retouching could quite disguise. "What is it?" Daniel asked, coming up behind me with 2 mugs of coffee. I showed him the card. He tilted his head. "Huh, they look miserable." "They do," I agreed, setting it on the counter. "Does that make you happy?" I considered the question honestly. "No," I admitted. "It makes me sad. Just not for me anymore. For them." Daniel wrapped an arm around me. 12 years ago, they cropped you out of their picture. Now they can't crop out the empty space you left behind. I leaned into him. They'd tried so hard, so long to erase me from the frame, and now, even in their own photographs, my absence seemed louder than my presence could ever have been.
I still see Grandpa Walter regularly. His health has stabilized some, though not entirely, enough that we've had real time together. Time I plan to hold on to for as long as I possibly can. Last month, we sat together going through an old wooden box of his early photographs from decades before I was even born. Near the bottom, we found a family photo from 1968, his own parents and siblings gathered for some holiday, and there, at the very edge of the frame, slightly apart from everyone else, a teenage boy with uncertain eyes, my grandfather, 16 years old, standing just outside the family circle. I turned the photo over. Someone had written on the back in faded pencil, "Walter, always the difficult one." I looked up at him. "You were like me." He nodded slowly, something old and tired passing across his face. I was the one they pushed to the edges too, a long time ago. I think, without ever meaning to, I let some of that pattern carry forward without noticing it happening. He squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry it took me this long to see it clearly." "The cycle ends here," I told him quietly. He held on to my hand a little longer than usual. "I hope it does," he said. "I built a company on the idea of solid foundations, Vanessa, and somewhere along the way, I let the foundation of my own family go untested for decades. I don't know how to fix all of it. I don't think I have enough years left to fix all of it, but I can at least make sure it stops with the people who are still here to choose differently." We spent the rest of that afternoon simply going through the rest of the box together, one photograph at a time, him narrating small pieces of family history I'd never once heard growing up. Who had built the original office? Which client had nearly bankrupted the firm in its second year? Which employee had stayed with him for 35 years before retiring? It struck me, sitting there, that this was the actual inheritance that had mattered all along. Not the trust, not the equity stake, not even the apology. Just an old man finally willing to hand his real history to the granddaughter who'd actually shown up to receive it. It's been 9 months since I walked out of that studio. Daniel and I are engaged now, he asked in the spring, at the same park where he first told me his theory about families obsessed with looking perfect. Our apartment walls are covered with photographs, our friends, Aunt Corinne, Grandpa Walter, a real, imperfect, chosen family, exactly as it is. I've noticed something small but persistent since all of this happened. I no longer flinch when someone pulls out a camera at a gathering. For years, without fully realizing it, I'd developed a kind of quiet bracing whenever photos came out, an old instinct that told me to step slightly out of frame before anyone had to ask me to. It took months of deliberately standing where I actually wanted to stand, of Daniel gently pulling me back into shots I'd started drifting out of by habit, before that instinct finally started to loosen its grip. I don't think most people would ever notice something like that about another person.
I notice it in myself every single time now, and every time I choose to stay in the frame anyway. Sometimes I still think about those 12 years of brochures, smiling faces that never once included mine. For a long time, I genuinely believed being left out of those photos meant I simply didn't matter enough to include. I was wrong. I always mattered. The only thing missing for over a decade was people willing to actually see it. My parents haven't reached out since that final phone call. Neither has Paige. The silence used to hurt in a sharp, specific way. Now, mostly, it feels like quiet. Because here's what I've learned through all of this. You cannot force people to value you correctly, and you cannot perform your way into a family that's already quietly decided you don't fit their frame. But you absolutely can build something new, a family rooted in truth instead of image, in consistency instead of convenience. I've started keeping my own version of an album now, separate from the one I built for my grandfather. It's still thin, only a year's worth of pages so far, but every photograph in it is one I actually chose to be in, standing exactly where I wanted to stand, next to people who never once asked me to move out of frame. Some years it might only be a handful of photographs. I've decided that's more than enough. Quality was never really the thing my family got wrong for 12 years. It was simply whether or not I was allowed to exist in the picture at all. They cropped me out of every photo they sent into the world, but they never once managed to crop me out of my own story. I think often about that photo of Grandpa Walter at 16, standing just outside his own family's frame, and about how easy it would have been for that pattern to simply repeat itself forever, generation after generation, nobody ever stopping to ask why the same person kept ending up at the edge of every picture. It took 12 years, an intercepted inbox, and one album full of brochures for someone to finally interrupt it. I think about how close it came to not happening at all. If Corinne hadn't run into me at that farmer's market, if Daniel hadn't asked a simple, gentle question about family photos over dinner, if I said no to that studio invitation instead of walking in early to listen. Sometimes the difference between a pattern continuing for another 50 years and a pattern finally breaking comes down to something as small as one overheard conversation and one person deciding they were done accepting a version of events that didn't match what they knew to be true about themselves. If you're watching this and you have ever felt edited out of your own family, your workplace, anywhere that was supposed to make room for you, I want you to know something clearly. You were never the problem. Someone else's inability or unwillingness to include you was never a reflection of your actual worth. And one day, you'll find the people who make space for you without needing a reason to. That's my story. Now I genuinely want to hear yours. Have you ever felt cropped out of your own family's picture? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and you are absolutely not alone in this. I'll leave you with the one thing I wish someone had told me back when I was 20 years old, sitting in that studio lobby, convinced there must be something wrong with how I looked in the light. There wasn't. There never is for anyone going through something similar. The lighting was always fine. The only thing that ever needed fixing was who was allowed to decide whether you belonged in the frame in the first place, and eventually that decision gets to be yours. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight, and I'll see you in the next Silent Victory story.